Hello and welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast. I am your host and navigator, Tony Myers. We have a very special episode for you tonight. I have some very good friends of mine joining me, intelligent, cogent individuals that speak with diffidence and parrhesia, joining me for a roundtable. That'll be quite entertaining, and I'm hoping to emulate or simulate sort of the conversations that you would have with friends or family, especially around these complex topics that are being presented to us in our world today.
A-Ring, a wearable air purifier designed to generate a pure and refreshing atmosphere around the user's face.
Tonight's episode is called Spotify Seppuku, thanks to Neil Young and the continual issue of Joe Rogan breaking the internet. We have a plethora of clips we're going to get to tonight. First couple of hours, like I said, is going to be a roundtable. We're going to show clips as we normally do, but then we're going to have more of a general discussion around those clips and commentary. And I hope to elucidate some different ideas presented by different individuals, how they see things in regards to what's going on and what's being presented in those clips.
Yeah, and socially, I do think it is a bit of a war for the middle on the management of these perceptions that are happening right now. So I know we've all been used to this concept that was introduced by Matthias Desmet of mass formation for like 4 or 5 months now, maybe some of us longer. And whatever anybody thinks of it, one of the useful things that did come out of it was the way he broke out. I don't know where he got his percentages of like 30% of people will always go for the mass hypnosis, 20% will always resist, and then you have this group in the middle. And that group in the middle is composed of people who are uninformed, lazy, scared, and they don't do anything as a result of that. So their inaction is portrayed by the media and the political elites as compliance, right? By not acting, like if they weren't complying, they would act. So all of this narrative war, this information war that's happening right now, I think is about those people. Because if you're talking about the fringes of this situation, and we do it with the Canadian trucker story currently, people who've persevered through this situation for almost 2 years now are either on one side looking at the next group of people that they can point their arrows at, or people on the other side looking at the next group or individual that they can turn into a hero. And the arrows in this case are those anxieties. So again, it's like there is some block of people that are immediately going to villainize these truckers. They don't need any more information about what's happening. Nothing they can they can see is going to change their mind about this. There is no wake up call. I mean, for some people, and maybe there's that group on one hard edge even breaks out into different levels of reasonableness. But most of those people are never going to be persuaded by something like this. And there's people on the other side who are always going to support this no matter what happens in Ottawa over the next days or weeks. So this is very much about the hearts and minds of the people in the middle. And I think what James said about, seeing people on the overpasses, for a lot of those people, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but that might be their first act of defiance in this whole thing, is that, I can go to an overpass and I can be part of a crowd of people that waves and holds a sign and cheers as these guys drive by. So that is another part of this that's encouraging.
Then about midnight, we're going to step away from that. I'm going to finish out the show solo, and we're going to go into the rest of the show card just because it's so voluminous. I want to expedite making sure we get to some of the major clips from this past week. And one of those being Academy of Ideas did a very fascinating video talking about sort of the rise of authoritarianism in juxtaposition to sort of cowardice. And so kind of getting into the psychology of why sort of the congruent relationship, the proportional relationship, if you will, between cowardice and tyranny.
In this video, we are going to explore how a hyperconformity and blind obedience has infected the West and, in the process, crowded out the cultivation of courage. We will discuss how a widespread cowardice is permitting the rise of authoritarianism, and how a rebirth of courage is the antidote to our precarious political predicament. The pathological conformity that infects the West is generations in the making and the result of a confluence of factors. It is driven by a value system in which social validation occupies a preeminent position. It is furthered by the use of social media and the fact that success on these platforms is achieved by virtue signaling and conforming to the moral flavors of the day. It is also a product of an education system which deifies the democratic ideal and promotes the rights of the majority over the rights of the individual. These factors, combined with others, has created a society of hyperconformists. And as Rollo May explained, the opposite to courage, in our particular age, is automaton conformity. One of the ways that Western conformity manifests is through a blind obedience and a pathological need to follow rules. Most people believe that to be a good person is to be a compliant person, and to do what one is told by those in positions of political power and their lackeys in the media and celebrity culture. In acting with blind obedience, the conformist fails to differentiate between morality and legality, and so remains willfully ignorant of the fact that government rules can be immoral, driven by corruption, and that sometimes they pave the way for individual and social ruin. Or as Rollo May explains, our particular problem in the present day is an overwhelming tendency toward conformity. In such times, ethics tend more and more to be identified with obedience. One is good to the extent that one obeys the dictates of society. It is as though the more unquestioning obedience, the better. But what really is ethical about obedience? If one's goal were simple obedience, one could train a dog to fulfill the requirements very well. To see other people exercise independent judgment, self-responsibility, and self-reliance disturbs the conformists' belief in the value of obedience and so threatens their sense of self. It is not the case, therefore, that the conformist obeys while permitting others the freedom to make their own choice. Rather, as Stanley Feldman explains in a paper titled Enforcing Conformity, people who value social conformity support the government when it wants to increase its control over social behavior and punish nonconformity. Valuing social conformity increases the motivation for placing restrictions on behavior. The desire for social freedom is now subservient to the enforcement of social norms and rules. Thus, groups will be targeted for repression to the extent that they challenge social conformity.
Then we have Stephen Crowder making a little bit of fun of the Barry Weiss situation on Bill Maher, speaking a little bit of too much candor potentially. Barry Weiss, that is, who sort of sees herself as sort of a classical liberal, I believe. We'll get into that.
Okay, this was on this morning on CNN. So, Barry Weiss was on Bill Maher.
Yeah.
And Barry Weiss used to work with, I believe, the New York Times and has had sort of an awakening. Not really conservative, but I guess you would call her a classical liberal. And she made some totally reasonable points on Bill Maher, which, of course, was trending all over this weekend because people were furious.
I'm done with COVID. I'm done. It's like I went so hard on COVID. I
remember.
Sprayed the Pringles cans that I bought at the grocery store, stripped my clothes off because I thought COVID would be on my clothes. Like, I did it all. And then we were told, you get the vaccine.
That was my
excuse. You get the vaccine
subway.
and you get back to normal. And we haven't gotten back to normal. And it's ridiculous at this point.
We have.
This is going to be remembered by the younger generation as a catastrophic moral crime. The city of Flint, Michigan, which is 80%, I think, minority students, has just announced indefinite virtual schooling.
Also known as a majority.
In the past 2 years, we've seen among young girls a 51% increase in self-harm. People are killing themselves. They are anxious. They are depressed. They are lonely. That is why we need to end it.
She ranted about how inconvenienced she has been by this pandemic and how it's not real anymore. Well, I'll tell you that for the 10,000 Americans who died last week and for their families, it was damn real. And for the people who, struggle to keep them alive, and for the thousands and thousands of healthcare workers who have been doing this nonstop for 2 years, her behavior was childish and selfish.
Okay. So you notice what she said? She said, look, we do have record number of teenage, specifically teenage girls.
Yeah.
They're self-harm. And of course, if you look into those statistics, all references available at louderwithcrowder.com. We have them below as well. We've done several episodes on this. There's been an increase in substance abuse. There's been an increase in hospitalizations for alcoholism. Right? Suicides, way up. And he says, I think she's being childish because she's just talking about how she's been inconvenienced. She didn't discuss herself being inconvenienced at all.
No. It was all about how other people are being destroyed by this, specifically the people that we say we sacrifice everything for, our children.
Right.
Right now, we're sacrificing them
right.
to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah.
And also, Brett and Heather discusses why, or they believe that Fauci seems to be unfireable, if you will. Why can't Fauci be fired? You know, what type of power does he really wield? And especially through the NIAID.
I've wondered why Trump didn't fire Fauci, in the insight as to why he didn't. I don't think he's fireable somehow.
I agree. The way he has ruled public health and related fields through
and
basically
science. So much of science.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously doesn't extend beyond a certain level, but there's an ability to cause your fortunes to reverse, right? If you're on Fauci's good side, the money can flow and you can start rising in your field. If you're run afoul of him, it can be the end of your career. And so I think the answer is Heather and I know nothing about the detail of how that worked, but imagine for a second a system in which somebody has amassed so much power. And remember, he did turn down, I believe, the attempt to promote him to NIH head.
Yes, that is, Bush 2, I believe, tried to promote him to NIH, and he politely declined. And I think basically his fiefdom, he had and retains more power as head of the NIAID than he would have as NIH. And, you know, Collins, who I guess is stepping or has already stepped down, is nominally his boss, but not really.
Right. So I think the thing is, why would somebody turn down that promotion? And the answer is because I have built all of these things into this position that allow me carte blanche. Right. And why would I start over?
So it'll be interesting to get into those topics tonight. And we have a number of clips. We have Aaron and Melissa Dykes getting into the whole concept of a post-work society.
There's going to be hundreds of millions of people laid off, people who don't know what kind of jobs to get, don't know what they want, and they're basically going to be relying on things like universal basic income, other government benefits to make up for wages they don't have as they try to fit into a society that frankly doesn't need any of us except on the level of consumers. And I did think it was worth pointing out that this is the very opposite of they just came up with this phrase, the future of work. This is the buzz phrase that has been workshopped and handed down hierarchically. I don't think I need to tell anyone that the World Economic Forum has just been all over these related issues, but they themselves put out a future of jobs report for 2020. They have their own Center for the New Economy and Society, and this particular term, the future of work, has become an official buzzword for commissions and studies in various states, California, Massachusetts among them, I think Utah and a few others. And I remember too that it was a topic back in 2018, several years back before the pandemic, of the very secretive Bill.
I'm sorry, that's the wrong answer.
Without further ado, we're going to start tonight's podcast, as we always do, with Luke Rudowski from We Are Change. And let's go ahead and get to that first clip.
What a moment in Canadian history here at Parliament Hill. I love you, Canada! Yeah! The revolution will not be televised, but it will be moderately distributed on YouTube, depending on how far we can beat the AI algorithm that decides how many people see this video in the general public.
Ready for something crazy? If you spent time in the standard American school system from kindergarten through high school, you've spent 15,000 hours of your precious life in a classroom. Shocking. But yet, look at where we're at. Many of us feel totally ill-equipped to function in this crazy, overwhelming, hyper-competitive world. We get anxiety at the prospect of adulting, and entrepreneurship totally just feels like a pipe dream. This is the thing. I found a resource that has made the hugest world of difference for me and my journey of confidence, self-reliance, and success in an unpredictable world. It's called 19 Skills for Success That School Never Taught You. It's a free resource that I consider to be totally priceless and has taught me many of the skills I need to know to be flexible and to succeed in a world full of uncertainty. Who knows what the next few years could bring? I believe that you were made for more. And if you could succeed without these tools for self-reliance, wouldn't you have done it already?